Welcome everyone to the PYRESWAP show, and of course we're so glad to have you here for Wednesday, middle of the week, and I guess we have some stuff to announce. We do have this. We do have a live AMA coming on Friday with Dow King, formerly known as, now known as Crypto Circus, Dow King of Crypto Circus. I don't know how exactly he wants that mentioned, but we will be having a live AMA, and this arguably I think is going to be a bit more focused about the PYRESWAP side of things, if that makes sense. And I think we'll have that. I'll be making an announcement about that in the PYRESWAP server tomorrow or Friday. Additionally, I was going to ask you guys if you wanted to have a conversation that continues to talk about future phases of PYRESWAP and the GPSC, and more so about factionalization and how that works. Does that make sense? And I can also talk about the night game more in depth if you guys would like that. Does that make sense? Okay, so it makes sense. Okay, so I think that's what I'll do. Okay, so when we talk about the which game and the night game, we really have, let's draw this acronym up on the board again. So I'm going to draw these two trees of reclassification. So we're going to have reclassification. And we're going to draw it out like this. Bonding and meeting. Make sense to you guys? Bonding and meeting? And bonding, reclassification as it goes, or should I say bondable versus meetable is really the word to describe here. I should change these labels. So bondable, this is less than or equal to 0.99. And meetable is less than 0.80. Does that make sense to you guys? And we're talking about TWAPs here, of course. Now, bondable, you're remaining kind of on the night side of the fence. Like you're still involved in the tomb fork here when it comes to bonding. You are really just, let's say for 2 ohm, you're just taking 2 ohm and you're burning 2 ohm to issue 2 bond. Now, 2 bond gets burned back when you're above peg, and you can get 2 ohm for it. The 2 ohm that is printed during a boardroom print when bonds are in circulation is in fact deprecated by the amount of bonds in circulation. So like the more bonds that are in circulation, the more deprecated a print is going to be. Does that make sense? Hope it makes sense. Okay. So this reclassification, they both, yeah. You're laggy on Discord, huh? Okay. Sounds good. Don't know if there's like it must be because it's Amazon Prime Day, and yeah, Amazon is just lagging the whole internet right now. Everybody, the savings, the savings are too serious. Yeah, who knows? Bondable and meetable, there are these 2 different thresholds that when the debt gets below here, because by the way, it never actually has to. It never actually does, right? If you have facilitation happening above peg and you're like at above 1.05 TWAP, and even if you're selling, right, you could be originating debt, you could still remain in that same classification of being credit worthy. Does that make sense? Facilitation and reclassification, they just don't happen at the same TWAPs. Like you're either having facilitation or reclassification happening, like at best, maybe neither if you're in that exact range of 1.00. But generally speaking, it doesn't seem to behave too much like it would be between 1.01 and 0.99. So as you get bonded, as you get meted, you're still temporarily reducing total supply, whereas you're meeting, you're permanently doing it. Okay. Hope this makes sense. As you're doing this, you are in fact, we're not even talking about reclassification. We're talking about consolidation at this point. Okay, let me move this on. So then we have consolidation. And this is now in fact the actual bonding. And this in fact is the actual meeting. Okay. And when this happens, this is again a temporary reduction. Yeah, temporary TS reduction, and this is a permanent. Okay, so the reason the meeting threshold is significantly lower than the bonding threshold is because the state of the debt is much more severe at this point. You have like obviously a much larger problem. Would you guys agree that having a TWAP below 0.80 is a larger problem than having a TWAP below 0.99? Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? Man, we must have not gotten our ping out today. Do you guys know what I mean? Goodness gracious. And we had a whole bunch of people saying they were going to be here today. Yeah. Thank you, Trigger. Thank you. So Trigger knows what I'm talking about. Okay. All right. So, again... your scenario here is more severe. And think of it this way. When you're in a car, you have like a seatbelt, but you also have an airbag, right? Would you guys agree a seatbelt and an airbag, they're kind of both the same thing? Well, Alessio, not just that range. No. I kind of mean they're both going, they're both different. The ratio we're looking at here is against 1.01 or against PEG. Does that make sense? So, I mean, looking at 0.8 against PEG or looking at 0.99 against PEG. So looking at them both against PEG, not against each other. Does that make sense? Got it? So, Alessio, again, in the interest of a tomb fork remaining near PEG, would you not agree that being below 0.8 is like a more drastic problem than being below 0.99? The distance from your PEG is a bigger problem. Everybody follow me? So, until the problem gets big enough, the solution doesn't need to be that big, right? So, bondable, like bonding, is a smaller solution than meeting. Does that make sense? But it's also what makes sense in this range. It makes sense to like, hey, we don't need to go to the point of bonding. Sorry, we don't need to go to the point of meeting. We can just bond. So bonding, you can think of it like this is putting a seatbelt on in the car. Now, do you guys live in countries where the cars also have airbags? Do you guys have airbags in your car that if you're in an accident, they deploy a bag of air? And the air prevents your forehead from like getting smashed against the dashboard. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Fantastic, Alessio. Let me never Let me never say anything negative about your participation, because right now you're holding up the whole house. Yeah, you're the one keeping the lights on right now. So bravo, Alessio, for your absolute stellar and consistent participation in the PYRESWAP show. And it's the same concept here. That's the allegory. Like, meeting is like, hey, we're in a much more serious accident. Does that make sense? It's like, hey, we now need to deploy an airbag. Hey, no worries, yeah. Yeah, so meeting is like the airbag getting deployed. Bonding is like the seatbelt locking. Does that make sense? You guys know when the seatbelt locks sometimes? Right? Because it's like, oh, you pulled too fast. The seatbelt locks. At the end of the day, though, like the airbag, why do we even have airbags? Because they recognize that seatbelts aren't like seatbelts can fail, and seatbelts also, they might not work, right? So you need to have a secondary safety mechanism, and that's what we have meeting for. Does that make sense? Peg safety mechanisms. So bonding and meeting, they both cause, however, a reduction in credit worthiness. A reduction. Because the credit worthiness, sorry, they don't cause a reduction in credit worthiness. They cause an increase in credit worthiness. They cause a reduction in credit limit. Okay? Going back to the PYRESWAP as a decentralized credit union. Let's think about how a boardroom can derive credit. In order to derive credit, there's really two parameters that have to be described first. Credit limit and credit worthiness. And what are these questions? Credit limit is how much? Credit worthiness, yes or no? These are the two questions. So when determining if somebody when determining credit for an actor, you have to determine their credit worthiness, you have to determine their credit limit. So like, are they credit worthy, yes or no? If they are credit worthy, how much credit limit is extended to them? Does that make sense to you guys? So what determines credit worthiness? I'll tell you guys. TWAP being greater than or equal to 1.01. Does that make sense? If this is a yes, the system is credit worthy. If this is a no, the system is not credit worthy. And if it's not credit worthy, credit is only facilitated when the system is credit worthy. Now, do you guys understand that? Like, this is really like a basic human decision. If you don't believe somebody's worth the risk, you're not going to take the risk. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Credit is facilitated when the system is credit worthy. Is only facilitated. So if the system is not credit worthy, this is a no. When TWAP is less than this, credit is not facilitated. Does that make sense? Because what are we talking about when we say credit is facilitated? Okay. And what do we mean? Like, what do we mean in the most in a layman's description of credit being facilitated? What type of activity or event are we talking about in the GPSE? Okay, I'll tell you guys. It's a boardroom print. Yeah, it's a boardroom print, right? Yeah, well, actually just the printing. Just the printing. Origination is the selling of the prints. Because until a print is sold, you wouldn't go below peg. Does that make sense? Okay. How much creditworthiness, yes or no? To go over this, credit is facilitated when the system is deemed creditworthy. Okay? So this is how you determine creditworthiness. Now, the much more complicated question is credit limit. And this, by the way, is done total supply times expansion rate per epoch. Yeah, but I guess you could say credit-worthy epochs. Does that make sense? Let's write CW here. Does that make sense? This is how credit limit is determined. Do you guys understand? So, 2 ohm right now. Two ohm has 5.7 million total supply. Okay, now if we get to peg with 5.7 million total supply, and we say 2 ohm also has a 2% expansion rate, then that means per epoch, let me pull up my trusty calendar here, 5,700,000 times 0.02 equals 114,000. Oh, sorry, just 114,000. I won't even take the comma there. 114K. 2 ohm is facilitated. Does that make sense to you guys? Isn't 2% divided by 3? Are you referring to the bonds, Alessio? Like, do you mean because of the bonds? Is that the concept you're referring to? Because bonding reduces it? By the way, the amount of bonds in circulation reduce this amount. So if we have a 2% expansion rate and there's 2 bonds in circulation, okay, Alessio, I believe it only gets reduced by 35%. So in theory, it would be like 1.4%. Does that make sense? I think it would still be a 1.4 expansion rate. Also, Alessio, I want you to know, when we print, we'll also have less than 5.7 million. Does that make sense? You're correct, though, for knowing this. But I'm trying to make it easier before we say, hey, by the way, bonds being in circulation also will reduce this. Does that make sense? Because, you know, I hope that makes sense. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's cleaner. You get what I'm saying? Technically, we're just simulating this anyway. If we're going to simulate that we'll have a print with 5.7 million, we can also simulate that we don't have any bonds in circulation right now, right? Now, the good news is that, like, let's say we have 114,000 2 ohm here. The print being smaller makes it easier. Does that make sense? So, like, the print being smaller makes it easier to stay above peg when you do get above peg. Does that make sense to you guys? Yep, okay. So, like, the bonds are there to help the peg stay above peg longer, and you guys might realize the value in keeping bonds in circulation. Oh, yeah. No, bonds in circulation means bonds are already out there. So, Alessio, there's no more bonds you can get from 2 ohm, right? Let's go look. Let's go actually check. 2 ohm dot finance. All right, let's go look at process the alert. What is this? This website has low popularity. Brabby, you tickle me. Okay. So you see here, right here, 0.002 bond available. By the way, I'm not going to call it purchase in the future. You get issued bonds. Does that make sense? Yeah, bonds are issued. 0-2 bond available for issue. That's what we will say in the future. Purchase confuses the fuck out of people. It's like, are we swapping here? We're not swapping. Yeah, for issue. Yeah, or probably like conversion and reconversion, something like that. But anyways, yeah, 2ohm has this with a 2% expansion rate. You're gonna have 114,000 2ohm facilitated. Now, guys, great news, great news. And by the way, Alessio, we're just gonna skip the bonds. We're gonna skip the bonds. Now, what's our total supply? Right now, it has 5.7 million plus 114,000 total supply. Right? Would you guys agree? Okay. So now we have 500. Now we have 5.8. Correct, man. Correct. 5.8. This is again this number we can just write it here is like 5.814 million total supply. Does that make sense? Yep. Each print is bigger. Yep. Correct, Maddie. Correct. And Maddie, this is also like this ticking time bomb. Yeah. This ticking time bomb, right? It's like, okay, do the knights have the self-control and the skills to really manage this, you know? Which I can't wait. I can't fucking wait to actually see like the real knight game, like start developing. Like it'll definitely fucking be interesting. And by the way, communication and the way information is conveyed, like it's only gonna get more and more intricate, but like that's one of the reasons that we're gonna have such a strong community as a project, because we're gonna have multiple communities that all have a reason for working together. Does that make sense to you guys? So like while Maddie is in fact building relationships of trust with the witches, Alessio might need to be building relationships of trust with the knights. Does that make sense? Like literally like the community becomes a real thing. Do you guys get what I'm saying? It's not like, oh, these are just a bunch of guys front running each other, but actually like, oh, hey, we have a financial incentive to actually communicate and work together. Do you guys understand? So like our communities, as we build them stronger and deeper, like they won't just fall apart whenever like a red candle happens. Does that make sense to you guys? Like there's just like a depth to the community design here, and it's around creating factions of bankers. I'm not joking. Yeah. They're just different styles of bankers. They're different types of bankers. Yeah, but it's like they're just really engaging in banking. Hope that makes sense. And I mean banking in a more higher craft type of thing. Alessio, I have zero doubts. Yeah, okay. So the credit limit is how much, and 2ohm now has this much. And now we have a 2% expansion rate of this amount. So if we go back to the fancy calculator, and then we do plus 5700000. We have 5.8. Now, if we multiply this by 0.02, holy shit. Did you guys see that right there? Did you guys see it? New print. New print is what? JV, I'll answer your question in a second. 116,280 new facilitation. Javery, no. Yeah. As far as like being a leader of both, Javery, no. Because the fact of the matter is that you will be at odds. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, Javery, can you play as a witch and a knight? Yes, but you cannot be both a banneret or a channeler. Because most people will drift around. I have some numbers here for what I expect will happen. Javery, I expect that most of the time, as the community grows, channelers won't be so heavily involved on one chain. Like right now, the IWV is only, like on Phantom, we don't really necessarily need channelers on yellow or red chain right now. Does that make sense? Like there's not really a real need for channelers, right? Because it's not like, there isn't that much to organize. There's only like 3 people tops on the red and yellow chains. But on the blue chain, there's more and more of a case for channelers, right? So as the community grows there, it will make more sense that all the channelers are in fact at least watching all the games on all chains. Does that make sense? You're not going to be as chain specific, right? Because sometimes it will make more sense to focus on a different chain, especially if focusing on a different chain helps you win the confidence of the witches. Does that make sense? Like, also, you might be having problems on one chain that you're not having on another. Make sense? Again, yeah, Jabri, like, right now there's a fixation on, like, oh, hey, do we need to, I was describing this, like, whatever the problem is on Phantom, you might not have that problem on Avalanche. Does that make sense? So you can, in fact, shift players around to be like, hey, depending how intricate you guys get with your communication and organization, you guys could, in fact, keep new players on a certain chain, keep the more experienced, bloodthirsty players on a different chain. Make sense? Like, you can get extremely well organized, right? You're the team captain. Like, literally, like, tell them what to do. Be like you're calling them into a huddle. Like, you can make that happen. Now, in the when total supply, when you get into you need to understand, Jeffrey, that the channeler game gets weirder when Metatrage starts being a thing. Does that make sense? So Metatrage is going to happen eventually, and arguably Metatrage has some pros and cons both for the Knights and for the Witches. Does that make sense? But you just want to kind of make sure you're in the right one. Exactly, that too. So like there's so much context there about whether or not Metatrage serves the Knights or serves the Witches. Does that make sense? Either one of them can use it to serve themselves. Does that make sense? Right? You can use Metatrage to save tokens up of 2 ohm or whatever, right? And then literally when Pyre Phantom climbs up higher, you can dump 2 ohm for Pyre Phantom and go Arcane. Does that make sense? Like, you can keep dry powder and peg tokens and then crush it to go Arcane. That depends, right? Now, or you might be thinking more about your 2-share and thinking about the nostalgia of a 2-share print, right? Depends on again, your obligations, you'll have a much larger faction, right? And the Knights themselves, the Bannerets, they're not really involved in the Incantation Witch Vault, with the exception of doing those max swaps, crushing Pyre Phantom so that they can in fact pump back to peg. Because when you get above 0.80 TWAP, Pyre Phantom will still keep climbing by itself. Does that make sense? Yeah. Pyre Phantom will keep deflating. Does that make sense? And it'll keep burning too. Does that make sense? Pyre Phantom will keep burning and it'll keep buying. So it'll be like and buying. Right? But guess what won't? 2 ohm will not. Yeah, exactly. So 2 ohm, 3 ohm, and Z ohm will not keep getting bought, and they will not keep getting burnt. Does that make sense? So now the Knights have their own difficulty. Does that make sense? The Knights have their own difficulty, and they need to, in fact, rely on what you could call milking and kind of being parasitic on the incantation in order to, those max swap buttons? Have you guys ever seen those max swap buttons at the bottom of the Incantation Witch Vault? Yep. So that is just one. Allow that to be a preview if you can understand what would be happening in the future. Does that make sense? Like, you still get volume above 0.8. Don't worry. You still get volume for sure. We want a larger user base, so the Velvet Rope pattern has more users. Does that make sense? Because that kind of also allows for more unique styles of trading in a single epoch. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, like, obviously liquidity needs to get deeper, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, 2 ohm will not. 2 ohm will not. So 2 ohm, you might just flounder around 0.83, and it's like, what the fuck do I do? You can bond the Traj, but actually there's no more bonds for 2 ohm right now, right? No more 2 bonds. So in order for 2 ohm to get to peg, it'll either need to climb with Genesis emissions, right? Or, assuming there's no Genesis missions or farm missions or whatever, you'll need to masquerade trade to peg. In which case, it's literally like you're going to be trading Pyre Phantom in order to exit to 2 ohm. Does that make sense to you guys? Like you would be using 2 ohm as the safe haven, if that makes sense. By the way, you know, above 0.8, there's also no, like, okay, we turned decay off across the board, but also Pyre Phantom does not decay above 0.8, and that was also done by design. So like, it's not as easy for well, I guess it doesn't fucking matter at this point. Yeah, there's no more decay, so who cares? But yeah, Pyre Phantom will keep burning from the incantation. Does that make sense? It'll keep getting bought, it'll keep getting burned, right? Arguably, it's much closer to its peg. Pyre Phantom, when it goes to its own peg, it can have an event called Going Arcane, which is, I'll tell you this, an Arcane, and welcome Monica on Twitch. Thank you for your compliment, I think. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Trigger. Anyways, so like when the Witch Vault goes Arcane, this is arguably way more exciting than a boardroom print. Does that make sense? But a boardroom print might be more exciting than a regular incantation. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? Like a regular incantation happens all the time, right? Boardroom print slightly more exciting, but then an arcane incantation is even more exciting than a boardroom print. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. So yeah, that's I hope that makes sense. Yeah, it'll be like an arcane incantation when we have like hundreds of players, like that'll be fucking crazy as shit. Like that, like there, yeah. You can imagine this general chat would just be fucking swarming with fucking people chatting and asking, and you know, all types of emotions. Yeah, big like lots of adrenaline in the chat. Let's put it that way. I can't wait. Yep. Jabri, okay, so I'll answer that question as well. Like, the way that I look at it, I think that a banneret bannerets ought to try to be share coin whales. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, when I mean a whale, I mean like more than 1% or 2% of the total supply. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, not like a 10, like, I think we as the circus are going to be 15% eventually. Yeah. Maddie, again, practice makes perfect. Yep, practice makes perfect. Yep. Anyways, bannerets ought to try to become share coin whales. Depending on the share token, but most of them have between 50,000 and 70,000, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, like I think one of them, I have a list, but yeah, I think 2 share has 70,000, 3 share has 60,000. Yeah, there's you can look that up, Javery. They all have like a random, most of them are 5-figure numbers though, I'll tell you that. Yeah. I think D share has, yeah, okay. They're all between like 50,000 and 80,000, something like that. Yeah, for sure. Like they're all in that range. Bannerets already try to be share coin whales. So Javery, obviously probably more than 1,000. You know what I mean? Or more than 500 for like a banneret. But the thing is, Javery, that is also that's you don't want to be just one. Like you kind of need all 3 boardrooms. Does that make sense? All 3 boardrooms. Join the Knights cult. Yeah, Alessio is working hard on the memes. Yeah. By the way, if you guys, you know, Javery, if you want to be a banneret when we get to the above 0.8 range, if you want to be a banneret, you can, but you're not going to get back into the channelers. So, like, I'll let the guys that are channelers right now decide if they want to switch teams, but you're not going to be able to just jump back and forth, like, all over the place like a free agent. Yeah. And you might not care for it either. But, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So bannerets are trying to be share coin whales. However, channelers, yeah. Channelers ought, in my opinion, to have a little of all the share coins. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think channelers having a lot, like, channelers, in my opinion, ought to be, like, if there's 9 or 10 share coins, however the fuck that works, I think that channelers using, like, a smaller amount, let's put it this way, a banneret needs to be focused on their chain, right? Like, a banneret is not multi-chain, a banneret is not cross-chain, a banneret is single chain, right? Channelers, however, do not have that limitation, right? So, what I'm getting at here is that, like, imagine that a channeler and a banneret, they both had, like, $1,000 or whatever. Like, the banneret should have that money 333 across the 3 share tokens, but a witch could have, like, $111 across 9 share tokens. Does that make sense to you guys? This is not yet. Not yet. Well, Jayri, like, when you jump back and forth, Jayri, yeah, exactly. Jayri, I'll explain this. You want to think about, like, all the agendas that you're going to have when you're dealing with knights, right? So, first of all, I want you to notice this, Jayri. Jayri, would you say that you're 100% on Phantom and not really on BNB or AVAX, at least not at this time? Would you say that you're pretty much focused, at least 90%? Okay, consider this, Jayri. You're also going to have knights that are 100% in Z-Ohm or 100% in 2-Ohm. Make sense? So imagine you're a banneret. You're going to have these people in your community, and it's be like, hey guys, we have to peg 3-Ohm today. And you're going to have these knights like, why not 2-Ohm? Why not Z-Ohm? Does that make sense? When 2-Ohm? When Z-Ohm? And you're going to be in charge of that. Right? Does that make sense? And the fact of the matter is, Jayri, you actually have to bring them all prints in order to braid the liquidity. They all have to kind of get prints. Yeah, at least 2 of them need to be getting prints all the time. The night game has an aspect called putting a boardroom under discipline. Yeah, so the boardroom that is the most degen, that's the one that you want to starve out of printing. Does that make sense? It's kind of like you're giving that boardroom exercise, and you're kind of trying to shake out the hands of the people who are not playing along with the guidance of the bannerets. Does that make sense? Like, anybody who's not playing according to what the bannerets want to do, the bannerets kind of like starve that boardroom out. Does that make sense? They focus on the other 2 boardrooms, and whichever boardroom is behaving the best, that's the one that they bring to peg, right? Do you know why? Because think of it this way. You've got this, then you've got this, this, and this. Can anybody tell me? Can anybody guess what this is a diagram of? Here, I'll just label it like this. 2, 3, Z, and this one's called PYRESWAP. Do you guys get it? Do you guys understand this? Well, CJ, good news is that it already does, at least in total supply. But the fact of the matter is, CJ, when the night game gets this serious, you have to understand Pyre Phantom has this price pattern, right? Velvet rope pattern, as it were. Not always green, right? Half is red. The left side is red, right? Does that make sense? Dogfoot diagram, yeah, yeah, something like that. Anyways. So the fact of the matter is, Jayri, if you're trying to bring one token to peg, you can't bring all 3 of them there at the same time. Thank you, Trigger. Yeah, that's a decent one. I'm gonna use just this one for right now to focus right here. But like, if you're bringing 2-Ohm to peg, people that are, you know, what that basically means is you need to. You need to go in through 2-Ohm. Does that make sense? And then go right back out through 2-Ohm. You need to go from 2-Ohm to Pyre Phantom and then go right back to 2-Ohm. Does that make sense? If you have other knights, that are doing their own fucking weird shit, does that make sense? Guess what's gonna happen? Y'all are gonna fuck each other up. Does that make sense? Like, you're not going to bring any of them to peg because you're all going to be like dumping on top of each other. It's the way like two glasses pouring water into each other. Does that make sense? Because you're going to end up dividing the amount of capital that you can kind of, not the amount of capital, the amount of the value, I guess. If you want to like bring Pyre Phantom value and then push it into 2 ohm, right? It's like hungry hippos. Does that make sense? The little marbles are Pyre Phantom, and the hippos are kind of fighting over it. Does that make sense? But you can only bring, you know, if you're trying to get one of them to peg. See, not necessarily no. In fact, yeah, Pyre Phantom could be at a lower price, but still have a velvet rope pattern. Does that make sense? So Pyre Phantom could be at 0.83 and 2 ohm could be at 0.98, you know, and it would still work. Like, you can still get 2 ohm to peg from vamping. I didn't even know if I called it vamping. But yeah, from, well, Trigger, yeah. Oh, yeah, is that a Moo Dang reference? All right, okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, but what I'm getting at here is that, like, Pyre Phantom, yeah. I believe that it did. We'll see what happens. Yeah, Moo Dang is a meme coin. Like, wow, clearly this one's gonna be the one. Anyways, Pyre Phantom, right? Okay, it's more about what's happening in a single epoch. Does that make sense? So think about it this way: if you're trying to like make a large amount of Pyre Phantom do its best for 2 ohm, you don't want somebody playing for 3 ohm as a rogue agent doing that before you, because they're kind of like front running the Banneret's plan. Does that make sense? They are in fact not trading as a team. Make sense to you? So this is an example. Like, so Javery, you're already on Phantom only, right? So you're only on one of the 3 chains that the channel is going to be on. There's going to be other players in the Knights. They only care about the one boardroom. So I think on Phantom, it'll probably be that there's 2 share maxis, and I know that there's like a random faction of Z share maxis. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's I know that actually, I know a few people they really like 3 ohm and 3 share, like from a finance perspective, but like I don't think that they are sentimentally about 3 ohm and 3 share. Does that make sense? But yeah, there are people that like literally they favor one of them. So the people who favor, like, okay, it's now your job to get them to spread out. Does that make sense? Like, hey, yeah, it's now your job to get them to spread out. Does that make sense? And be a team player, because that's what a Banneret will have to do. Yep. Anyways, Javery, that is arguably how a Banneret will have to think, but like they don't stay at peg unless the Knights get good at it. Right? Because most of the players, what's so special about the 3? Three share. Oh, I have no idea. Electronic. Okay, yeah. There are some people who just believe that 3 ohm and 3 share was the best buy. Yeah, I don't give a shit. Yeah. I do not, yeah. I know that, like, back in 2023, there were some people that, like, you know, I don't care. Yeah. I think Z-Share is loved for being an underdog, and 2Share is loved for being that fucking gigantic project that it was. 2Share has the reputation, the storyline, and Z-Share is like the underdog. Yeah, likely. Yeah, the Dibs for sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dibs is already at like 0.9 at one point, 0.89. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Alessio, all of these problems, by the way, all of these like idiosyncrasies, these unique aspects of the Tomb Forks, they'll also change over time as well. You guys know what I mean? Like as these things start moving again, like, yeah, they'll change. I don't know how else to describe that. They will just change. Make sense to you guys? So like, one of the total, it is what it is. Arguably, I think that the Banneret job should kind of be about making them all the same. Does that make sense? Or making them all very balanced. So the Banneret job should be about making the 3 tomb forks very balanced among each other. Does that make sense? But yeah, they will have to take turns going to peg. Because otherwise, there's no real mechanism for them to be up there. By the way, this is another reason that we need to build the witch game first, because the user base of the witch game needs to get deep enough for the velvet rope pattern to be more impressive. The velvet rope pattern, if it doesn't scale to a certain degree, like, let's put it this way, it'll be a lot easier for the night game to work if the velvet rope pattern is very, very large. Do you guys understand that? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the night game has its own difficulties. Like that, this is meant to not be like. This is not, I was gonna disparage something, but I'm not going to. But yeah, this is not this type of like financial project. Do you guys remember NFB? Do you guys remember NFB? Yeah, like NFB is still like arguably still applies, but I am very bullish on people being able to figure this out. Well, Jabri, later on, you might be like, you know what? Maybe that's a cool fucking game. Because, Jabri, I'll tell you this. Knights have the ability to trust each other better than witches do. Yeah, there are pros and cons. But keep this in mind. You're going to have like these 6 factions of knights. Does that make sense? So think of it this way. 2 ohm print and mead, right? Let's say P and M. Then you have 3 ohm print and mead. Does that make sense? Then you have Z ohm print and mead, right? So in theory, when you're a banneret, you could have like 6 different sub factions of knights, and they want this. I want 3 ohm mead. I want 2 ohm print. I want Z ohm print. Does that make sense? And then like literally it's all about being the leader that organizes the team towards that common goal. Yeah, like they can all get what they want if they're all willing to kind of work as a team. Yeah, this is really just human nature again and again and again. I can't fucking wait. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like some people are like, oh wait, I want a metatrage because I make money from metatrage because I can trade the thing or whatever. Whatever. Right? And let's say that the TWAP is like 0.9. Let's say all 3 of them are at 0.9. Then you have these 6 different competing factions that want to either lower the price or raise the price. Does that make sense? Because once you're above 0.8, there's going to be these people that figure out that like, wait a minute, I can make more money from bringing this chart downwards. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. And by the way, yeah, meeting causes a sharp reduction in total supply. Do you know what I mean? Like it can go very, very fast. But the fact of the matter is that some people are not going to hold share tokens. If you hold share tokens, yeah, exactly, Maddie, correct. So we're going to talk about the price sensitivity. We're almost done here. We've got 10 more minutes. Here. Okay. Share token price sensitivity. Okay? What does this mean? We're going to talk about the factors that the share token price is sensitive to. There's a major one and there's a minor one. Who here knows the major one? Everyone does. Yes, TWAP indeed. Major. TWAP. Right? Exactly. Distance to peg. Does that make sense? and it's an inverse sensitivity, right? The closer you are, meaning the shorter the distance the peg, the higher the price. Does everybody agree? Right? Okay, who here knows the minor one, right? Does anyone know? It's the boardroom APR. Does that make sense? Really, boardroom yield. Yeah, boardroom yield. What does it say APR though? Okay, what's that yield actually? Because in order to bring 2 ohm, oh indeed, what is that controlled by? That's controlled by credit limit. That is the facilitation of credit limit, which is controlled by total supply. Make sense? And bonds, but yeah, we'll just say total supply. Boardroom yield. So, as you get closer and closer to peg, if you meet all the way there, you're going to crush total supply. If we crush 2 ohms total supply all the way to 1 million, the first print would be so small. Does that make sense? Remember when the print here was 116,000? It would be 20,000. You guys know what I mean? The first print would be 20,000 if we crush total supply all the way down to 1 million. Make sense to you guys? Right? And if the print is small, that's less total tokens getting sent to the boardroom stakers. And if there's less total tokens there, then it's less total money there. And if it's less total money there, if you divide that by the money of the share tokens, you're going to have boardroom yield be a smaller number. And if the boardroom yield is a smaller number, the market itself is going to view this token as a less valuable asset. And if the other users, exactly. So this is why, like Maddie was saying before, the Knights have the ability to get fucking share token price to $7,000, to $14,000. Does that make sense? The Knights do have the ability to get share token price all the way up to fucking $14,000. Okay? What was the T-share cap? 18 grand? The highest price for T-share? 18 grand or something like that? Anyways, yeah, you can get it higher than not only 2 shares previous all-time high, but you can get higher than T-shares all-time high. Make sense? But the fact of the matter is, you need to grow the total supply of the peg token. And in order to grow the total supply, the Knights have to get organized. By the way, so the minor price, does that make sense? So you want to know, like, will 2 share ever go up to $7,000 again? It's like, well, one, we know that it needs to be close to peg, and we know that total supply needs to be high. Does that make sense? Because that way, these two fucking prices, they make sense. Like, they're not going to be intermittent fucking pumps. Does that make sense? Like, there'll be rational conclusions derived by the market, right? There'll always be random noise on the chart, but these are going to be the major things, the major and the minor things, because right now, since we're so far below peg, we're at 0.075 right here on the screen, right? We're at 0.07, right? It's going to be like a 15x the peg. Therefore, we know that share token price will probably go up from here. However, if the total supply goes down, it'll be going up less. So if we get to peg with 5 million total supply, we will have a lot more expensive of a share token than if we get there with 1 million total supply. Does that make sense to you guys? This is also stuff that having a larger user base helps with, though, on the money side, for obvious reasons. Larger user base, more money. It just everything works out that way. We don't even need like the largest user base, but you know, a couple hundred, a couple thousand, a couple 10,000. We can get to 100,000 users. Why not, right? So I hope that makes sense. And yep. Alessio, you know what? It's possible. I think, again, you know, Alessio, you remember me talking about this in the Revelation Tour, and it wasn't really clear until you were able to actually, like, put your hands on it and interact with it a couple times, right? So when I talk about stuff on the whiteboard, it's like sometimes parts of it are clear and they make sense, but I think it'll be even easier for people to wrap their heads around it if they actually just engage and interact with the thing, right? And yeah, like we'll get there. We'll get there. Does that make sense, everybody? We only have the best and most exciting things coming up for this amazing project. And yeah, it's going to be a great time. Right? So yeah, you know, Jaber, you say like, you know, you're talked out of being a banneret. It's like, well, yeah, you never know, right? But again, Jaber, you can also be in the boardroom as a witch. Yeah. Yeah, you can be in the board. Like, there's nothing stopping you. You can decide whether or not, you know, you're most likely going to be a lurker. You can decide whether or not you want to listen to the bannerets or if you want to, in fact, thwart them. Because the bannerets, the bannerets are literally going to be running these drills on Pyre Phantom in order to fuck up your plays. Does that make sense? Because in the future, the channelers can also suggest transactions for the witches to make. Does that make sense? There's going to be more volume, more liquidity, and then more reasons to transact. Does that make sense? So it's not just like, hey, stake this amount. You can also be like, hey, buy this amount, sell this amount. Anyways, we're right around here at the hour mark, or 57 minutes. I'm glad we got to talk about this today. You guys have any other questions? Okay, there's no more questions. Well, that sounds like that's the buzzer. And I appreciate you guys coming to the PYRESWAP show for another fantastic Wednesday episode. We'll see you all tomorrow. And I might be making an announcement or two. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. Oh.